Okay, sorry, we got kind of cut off there. We were kind of in the middle of recapping the Joseph Campbell Hero's Journey stages. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint here, actually, because maybe that would be helpful. Just to recap the stages one more time. They have them all on here, but I don't think they have to go in necessary way that they're doing it. But you have the call to adventure. You have the possibility of supernatural aid. You have the possibility of the refusal of the call, which would look something like this. You refuse the call, and then you get drawn back in anyway. You might have threshold guardians. So you're crossing the threshold, you're entering into the other world. Then you might have a threshold guardian, like the scorpion men that Gilgamesh faced on his way to into the mountains of darkness, basically. But you might not have threshold guardians. They're an optional thing too. Bilbo Baggins doesn't really have threshold guardians necessarily when he decides to go on an adventure. But he does have Gandalf, who gives him the opportunity to go on an adventure, who would be more like the supernatural aid that helps him cross. But okay, you've done it. You cross the threshold, you're in the other world. Well, you're going to be on the road of trials. The road of trials is this next part. You encounter problems to solve, challenges to overcome. But along the way, you're going to have mentors or helpers, however you want to put it, people who help you along your journey, help you solve these problems. They might offer you advice. They might solve problems for you. They might be sort of obscure and confusing, but they'll help you out in some way or another. And what they really stand for is the capacities within your own self to solve these problems, because you're diving into the unconscious, which is why I like this diagram. The world of the unknown, the world of magic, is also very similar to the world of the unconscious. And you reach your greatest problem, your dark night of your soul. All hope seems lost. Things are the greatest struggle. This is also known as the abyss. But this leads to rebirth. When you feel almost completely destroyed, that's when you can be reborn. And you have some kind of revelation. The other word for this is the apotheosis. Apotheosis being, something to do with a god, union with a god. And there are different forms that this can take. You could achieve some sort of elixir. You could have atonement with the Father. You could have union with the goddess, or I think in the case of Labyrinth, with the god. Some sort of way of dealing with the god instead of the Father. And the Father would be some sort of figure that represents a powerful sort of authoritative presence in your life that you overcome, whether that's slaying a monster or being adopted by a king, being the new prince of the land, any of those types of things. But you can have all three at once, you can have only one of them, whatever works. But eventually you've got to go back into the world of the known, and you might bring the elixir back home. You might have to escape danger. You might have to run back home. You might not want to go home, which would be the refusal of the return. But eventually you do return home. And when you return home, when you cross the return threshold, you achieve freedom to live. You become the master of two worlds, and you have the power to be a powerful force for good. That's basically a recap of the stages there. Hope that's helpful. Let's look 5 on here. Let's see. Examples of tricksters in mythology. Tricksters in mythology, we've got Dionysus, who is the god of wine and madness and plays pranks on. Why am I blanking on his name? Sorry, guys, it's been a weird day. Basically, Dionysus uses sort of madness to get his revenge on those who have wronged him and didn't believe in him. You've got Anansi, who plays so many tricks that often he's the butt of the trick himself. He's the one who gets fooled. You've got Raven and Coyote, who are sort of tricky beings, being in between carnivores and herbivores. They're always sort of playing tricks and causing problems. Sometimes they steal things for themselves, but end up causing good things for other people inadvertently. You've got Prometheus, who was maybe more of a trickster in really ancient times, but in the Greek mythology that's come down to us, he mostly plays tricks on Zeus and makes it so that human beings can exist He steals fire for human beings. He makes human beings even though Zeus doesn't want him to. And he makes the sacrifices go human beings' way by tricking Zeus, making him think that he's getting a good deal when he's actually getting a bad deal on the sacrifices. But Zeus sort of overpowers him and punishes him. So he's a trickster who ultimately lost, but other tricksters get away scot-free. So those are all some examples of different tricksters here. Theories of myth and gender roles, I bet you can probably think of a lot of examples already. There's a lot of different people have tried to analyze how gender fits into these stories. You've got the anima and the animus from Carl Jung. You've got the idea of the union of the goddess from Joseph Campbell. And you've got atonement with the father, who is this sort of authority figure, is very male. You've got Propp's idea of the princess and the wedding, the princess being basically a plot device as a character, and marrying her at the end is the victory. And, so there's a lot going into this. And I guess the question I want you guys to think about is, do you agree or disagree with the way these authors approach these gender roles? Do you agree or disagree with these frameworks? And what is your take on all of this? Do you think they're overly focused on these gender roles, or do you think that the gender roles work and are a good way of analyzing the story? Okay, let's go through some more with the time that we have. Let's see. Definition of parataxis. So parataxis, this was a while back, is basically when you place two myths next to each other and you kind of fuse them into the same myth. So looking back at the book of Genesis, we said that there were two versions of the creation story that kind of got fused together. One's about the Garden of Eden, and the other's that God making the world out of the waters. And the waters one probably came from Babylon, when the Jews were in Babylon, and the Garden of Eden, about building a garden in a desert, probably came from when the Jews were in the desert. And then they get put together, and so they get treated kind of like they're the same story. Another example of parataxis would probably be how there's multiple father-son conflicts in Greek mythology. Maybe, they were different characters in the same myth, and then it kind of got duplicated over and over again. When you see duplications, repetition, sometimes that's an example of parataxis. Say one group of people had Uranus versus his son. So the son of Uranus, Cronus, defeats his father. And then another group of people had a different story, and they said, no, it was the thunder god Zeus who defeated his father. And they just put them together, and they make it a story about a father, a grandfather, and a son, and they all defeat each other in the same way. That's the kind of things that happen in mythology, and parataxis is when you put them together like that. Let's see. Donor figures in The Goose Girl, The Raven, and Faithful John. Well, Faithful John is very much a donor figure himself. He's the guy who is so loyal. And this is in the book if you want to review it. Faithful John is loyal, and the sort of lesson for the young king is to trust John because he's always acting in his best interest. So he is the ultimate wingman, the ultimate donor. In The Goose Girl, let's see, what do we have in the way of donor figures for the Goose Girl? Well, we've got Falalda, who's, I don't know if he's a helper or a donor. The line gets kind of blurred there. But so maybe we don't say there's so much in the way of donor figures. I'm trying to remember in the Goose Girl. I don't think there's that much. But I want to point out in the Raven, the weird donor figures is the thieves. The thieves don't even want to be donors. But the guy, who never gets a name, but is just sort of the man who's seeking after the princess, trying to turn her back into human from being a raven. The guy, he comes across this bunch of thieves who have stolen these magical artifacts like invisibility cloaks. So he just overcomes them. He just brute forces his way. That's his way of getting the stuff. And that counts as a donor figure because this is all about functions. What function do they serve in the story? And as a function, their function is to give the guy magical gifts that allow him to get the princess. Never mind that they're not actually gifts. He just steals them from them. But it's okay. They're thieves, right? It's okay to beat up and steal from people if they've already stolen it, maybe. Yeah. Let's see. Let's look at something else from number 3. Individuation. So this is Jung's process of coming to be yourself. So becoming more mature as an individual by recognizing the problems that you have in your subconscious that you've repressed. And mythology can help us do this because it shows this process of growth for heroes. And this is a big influence on Joseph Campbell and folks like him. Jung's case study of the little girl. Remember, there was that little girl who made a dream journal and gave it to her father. And a lot of the stories that she had from her dreams were about being transformed or creatures getting devoured or destroyed or in some way. And so Jung says that she is experiencing an intimation of her mortality, which basically means she's sort of scared of growing up. She's thinking about growing up, maybe going through puberty. She's also got a lot of religion-associated imagery in her brain, and so she's worried kind of about God and things like that. But he primarily interprets it that, she recognizes that she's going to grow up and she's going to die, and she's just sort of scared in that way. And he finds that interesting because it's connected to all this other mythology without her even being aware of that mythology. Let's see. Bettina Knapp's thoughts on Sita and the fire scene. Basically, she thinks this is an author who's mentioned in the sort of chapter in the book on the Ramayana. She thinks Sita's experience in the fire is a kind of rite of passage almost. That is, she's showing herself, she's proving who she is, and she's proving to Rama that she is actually worthy of being valued and not disrespected. Who are the Vanara? They are the monkey people who help them out. Help Rama out. The most prominent example being Hanuman, who is a god who is a symbol of loyalty because he's so loyal to Rama and worship. Let's see. We've mostly looked at all of that. So let's go up. Who opposes Gilgamesh? That's Inanna or Ishtar. I forget which one when I wrote down, but Nana or Ishtar is a good one to put down for that. There are also goddesses who help Gilgamesh. There's his mother. It's something like Ninsuri, but I haven't got it quite right. And Siduri, the ale goddess who makes beer. And both of them help him along the way. Let's see. The first step in a Jungian analysis. So when you're analyzing things in the way Jung does, you might be analyzing a dream, but if you're analyzing a myth, what you want to do is treat a character in the story like they're the dreamer. So like everything is coming out of their psychology. So the first step in a Jungian analysis is to identify the dreamer. And you can do this multiple times and have different outcomes each time. With The Wizard of Oz, we had the dreamer be Dorothy, and then we had it be the Scarecrow. And these led to some different sort of interpretations, which I think are both equally valid because the archetypes remind us of different parts of our life, different aspects of our experience. Children might identify with different characters as they grow up. I think that's just part of what Jung says. They grow to mature and they grow to become interested in different goals. Different characters appeal to them over time. Connection between dreams and myths. Basically, Jung and Joseph Campbell say that the dream is the personal myth and the myth is the public dream, that they have to do with these aspects of our subconscious. We have the subconscious of each individual person, all the things that are kind of below the surface that they don't talk about. But then Jung says society also has that. Different societies do. The whole world has a collective unconscious. And that's another point that we talk about here. Collective unconscious is just basically all the sort of subconscious things going on in human existence that affect us, even though they don't know that we affect us. And one of the places they show up is our stories. Okay. So that's about all we have time for, I think. Let's go to the discussion section and come up with some more, and I will meet you guys there for that discussion. All right, see you there.